everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the MK Confluence 2025, the flagship conference of MK Global. We're thrilled to have you join us for what promises to be 3 inspiring and impactful days. Our flagship conference has grown and matured with India and has witnessed some of the defining movements of this country. This year, our theme, India Ascending the Next Leap, couldn't be more timely and significant. As we stand at the cusp of a global reset, India faces its own share of challenges and opportunities. However, concrete policy levers and pragmatic approach to current global disorder can not only help India just survive, but even gain strong grounds. India can turn the global reset into a long-term competitive advantage by pairing macro stability with accelerated supply chain rewiring, innovation and tech upgrades, and market diversification. The focus should also be to continue reshaping towards green and digital industries, targeted human capital upgrades, and of course, sharper geopolitical and economic diplomacy. We believe India has its own edge in its ecosystem and its businesses as well as its ambitions. And despite impending global uncertainties, India is prepping to go beyond just scale. Throughout this conference, you can look forward to an array of engaging formats, including Maintrack sessions, thought-provoking panel discussions, and a robust set of more than 200 plus companies and more than 15,000 meetings, which are lined up for the next 3 days. So without much ado, I would like to invite the founder and managing director of MK Global, Mr. Krishna Kumar Karwa, to officially raise the curtain on day 1 of MK Confluence 2025. This is our strategy. Our next guest is someone who has been at the crossroads of corporate leadership and public sector transformation. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Adil Zainulbhai, Chairman of Capacity Building Commission of India. Mr. Adil has been instrumental in shaping India's approach to strengthening institutional capabilities and driving administrative reforms. A distinguished corporate leader and former MD of McKinsey India, he brings decades of experience in advising businesses and governments on strategy, innovation, and capacity building. Additionally, he served as the chairman of Quality Council of India between 2014-2022, where he was involved in many initiatives to improve the quality of goods and services and efficiency in government processes. Under his leadership, the Capacity Building Commission plays a pivotal role in implementing the National Program for Civil Services Capacity Building, Mission Karma Yogi, which aims to transform the public sector workforce for a new era of governance. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Adil to the stage, where he'll be joined by our Head of Research, Mr. Shadri Sen, for an engaging conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Adil, for joining us. It promises to be a fascinating session, and we'll get straight to it. In terms of, could you tell us a little bit more about your role at the Capacity Building Commission, and what role did it play in transforming the PSU space in India, and what progress have you seen in the years that you've been in this role? What objective targets have you achieved?
Thank you very much. Hello? Hello? Great. Thank you. Delighted to be here, as I'm always happy to talk about the Capacity Building Commission. So let me start out by asking all of you a question. So you can stop doing your phones. How many of you, in general, complain about the government? Okay, come on, be honest. Right, so I think this is a favorite thing of everyone. It is a God-given right to complain about the government. Whether you are growing at a massive growth rate or you're not growing at all, people always complain about the government. So 2 questions on this, right? One is, when we thought about who is it, so first of all, there is no such thing as government. Let me start with that. The government is 22 million civil servants. They're all individuals, And, the execution of government policy, varies depending on the individual. Have you ever seen every police officer work exactly the same? No, right? They're all individuals. So imagine 22 million of these, right? So when we complain about the government, we always think about the government as this, completely synchronized mass. And it isn't a synchronized mass. It is a collection of large number of individuals. So the first point is, it isn't a single mass. There's 22 million civil servants, 3 million central, something like 20 million, 19 million state, which includes urban local bodies, Panchayati Raj, etc. It includes everyone from the Safai Karmachari who's cleaning the streets of Mumbai to the cabinet secretary of the government of India. All of that combined is the civil service. So that's the first thing that I wanted everyone to understand. The PM's view was that all the civil servants at one point, were rule makers, and then they would catch people when they broke the rules. The civil service was designed by the British to rule India, and therefore as a civil servant, you set policy, and then when people broke policy or broke the rules, you would say you've broken the rules. And, so they were administrator of rules as a ruling entity. And I think the idea of the PM was that how do we change people's mindsets so that they understand that they are karmyogis and servants of the people, right? That they're serving the people, that what they're doing is seva bhav, serving. So instead of ruling, I am serving. How do you make everyone more citizen-centric? So this was the very small task that he set for the Capacity Building Commission. And he said, why don't you try and see if we can change people's mindsets to be citizen-centric, number one, and number two, train them and give them all the tools necessary to do their jobs well. Okay? Every tool that they need, you should give them. Every training that they need, you should give them, so they can execute what they're doing better. So that was what we started out with. Capacity Building Commission was set up 4 years ago. I've talked to lots of banks and TCS and ICIs and others, all of whom set out to train a very large number of people, and nobody has trained more than 0.1% of the number of people we are trying to train. So that was the challenge that we had. How do you do this and what do you do? So we started out by saying, so that was the first part. Second question I'll ask you. When I say the word bureaucracy or civil servant, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? IAS. Right. So IAS. I'm forgetting about the characteristics, I'm saying who. Out of the 22 million civil servants of the government of India and the states, IAS is 5,000 people. Okay? 5,000. But whenever we think about bureaucracy, everyone always thinks about the IAS. So when we got into the numbers and we said, okay, now we want to change people's mindsets, how do we start on this? We realized that IAS is a very, 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 very small segment of the population. As most of you know, IAS are chosen through a very competitive exam. IAS firmly believe that they are the best and the brightest in India. And trying to tell them what they don't know is a very difficult challenge. On the other hand, the Class B and Class C officers, who are, assistant engineers, havaldars, constables, etc., are people whom nobody pays any attention to. And if you give them something that they think will be useful, they will lap it up, right? And the IAS will say, I already know this. So when we started, sorry, I'm taking a long time, but I think it'll get to the, people need to understand this, right? So we said, other than the people who are sitting in the room, for the normal citizen of India, who is government? It's the havaldar, it's the postmaster, the postal worker who comes around, it is the ticket collector, and people whom they interact with day to day. Those are the people. So why don't we start making them more citizen-friendly than the IAS, which I'll come to in a second. So that was sort of the construct of how we started. And I think, I won't go through all the programs that we have, but we did two very, very big things that I want to talk about. The number one is called, it's a training session called Seva Bhav, which is to link the inner purpose of the individual who joined the government to the seva that they are doing. Okay? For most of you who are in corporates, this is like know yourself, right? You know yourself, know your customer, etc. So this is Indic knowledge systems, know yourself. How do I do Seva Bhav and link what I do? Sounds very esoteric, but it's a 2-day training session where we teach people how to be citizen-centric. So let me give you an example. You all are too rich to travel on suburban trains, right? Or trains. But you know, ticket collectors check your tickets. They're very powerful people. And most ticket collectors did a competitive exam to get in. There are only 14 interactions that account for 90% of what a ticket collector does. You can define what they do in 14 interactions. On average, the interaction is less than 20 seconds. So you have 20 seconds to make a difference in are you being citizen friendly or not. Right? So anyway, we have a 1-day training session which is run by them, which links to why did I join the service in the first place? What do I do? What gives me joy? What gives me pain? You can spend a lot of time and they will talk about the pain they feel every day. Because, you know, it's just a horrible thing, you know, telling people no all the time. You're sitting in the wrong seat, you don't have the right ticket, you're in the wrong place, you're on the wrong platform. It's just a no, 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 right? So anyway, they go through the training session and then we tell them, they role play how they will deal with a customer who has done whatever it is that they are doing or not doing. And then they go back out, and then after 6 months, so we did a survey 3 months before we trained 100,000 ticket collectors, and 6 months after we trained them, of citizens, asking them, did you see any difference? And the amazing thing is you do. You see a difference in how they behave. Then we did a survey, so it did make a difference. Then we did a survey of the ticket collectors and said, how do you feel now after 6 months? And I'll give you one vignette, because that's always better than statistics. One lady ticket collector, I sat in for the training, and so, you know, she went through and she said, you know, I used to go home every day and my kids would tell me, you know, it's horrible when you come home, because when you come home, you're like this, you know. You've had a rough day and you come home and, you know, you have to do stuff with us, it's just horrible. So home life was terrible. She didn't like her job. And 6 months after that, when we asked her, well, what was it like? She said, you know, I realized why I joined this job, or what I enjoy about it. If I can make one person smile in a day, I can get through the entire day. That's all I need to do. And now I can make 3 to 5 people smile a day, I have no problems. And so when I go home, my kids love me, my husband loves me, I don't yell at them. It has changed my life. It is the same job, but I do it better and it's better for me. This is what we are trying to do in terms of citizen centricity. Okay? It is not just that treat the citizens better, but it links to their own feeling of Seva Bhav. So this is what we're trying to do for 2 million people this year. Okay? We haven't yet done it for a lot of the IAS, so I'll come to that in a second. But a lot of people who deal with citizens, including all Delhi police before G20, all the UP police before they went to Kumbh Mela, is how to deal with citizens. So this is one of the very important things we're trying to do. It's a huge program, and we will hopefully train everybody to do this. We trained, so we had a session like this for the IS. So I'll come to the IS now. And actually it was very interesting. There is a set of people in DARPG, which is Department of Administrative Reform and Pension Grievances, which you've never heard of, but anyway, it exists. There are 50 people who do nothing but adjudicate pensions, right? So you're a civil servant, you write a nasty letter saying, you haven't sent me this month's pension, or you've given me 100 rupees less, and they have to respond to all of this. It's a horrible job. And they basically, so we get them in a room and you ask them, what do you do? What's your job? Somebody must have asked you at one stage, what's your job? And they will describe their job as I adjudicate Rule 34A. That is their entire job, right? And, you know, they go, I adjudicate Rule 34A. It's a really, you know, not a great thing to be able to tell your family and friends about the greatness of your job. By the time they finish Seva Bhav and you ask them, what is your job? They'll say, my job is to make the lives of 50 million pensioners easier. Okay? That's something they can feel proud about. They can tell their family feels proud about them. So, you know, there are thousands of these examples of individuals whose lives have gotten better and citizens whose lives have gotten better as a result of making them citizen friendly. So that is one very big thing we're trying to do. We're measuring it. It's making a difference. It hasn't changed everything, but we're measuring it. Then you say, okay, but what about the IAS? That's great for, you know, the ticket collector and the policeman. I'll give you one vignette about this. A very important IAS officer who's now a secretary in the government of India. We asked him what he does as he described his role. And he said his role is to write regulation for the X industry. I won't say that because I don't want you to try and then guess who's this person, right? And, you know, a very arrogant reply about, you know, we have 3 regulations that we take out for this industry, et cetera, et cetera. By the end of the one-day session, when you asked him, what is your job? He said, my job is to improve the health of 1.4 billion people. Okay? Now, that's something that, you know, drives you in a completely different way than I'm writing regulations, right? So that's what we're trying to do. So all of that is one thing, which is make people citizen-friendly. Make every civil servant citizen-friendly. The second big thing that we did, which is very unlike the government, but isn't a big thing in the private sector, is in the government, if you said, what kind of training should you have? You over there. I'll say, listen, intellectually, I can tell you what you should be good at, and I will come up with that training, and you go attend the training, and you should pick it up. We did something very different. We went and asked 100,000 people in the government, what do you need to do your job well? And it was very interesting. They told us stuff, which when we ran it by the PMO, they said, this doesn't make any sense at all. So now I'm going to guess. Anyway, so we built a digital training system that has 12 million users, 50 million courses taken, 3,200 courses, etc. So it's really ramped up dramatically. I'm going to ask you to guess, okay? So you have to pay attention. Could you name the 2 most popular courses for civil servants in India? Each of which has been taken by more than 1 million people. You're already in the civil service. Just guess, you don't have to yell it. Technology, rules, Excel. At the back, UPSC, you're right, because many of them sit for the UPSC exam. Public policy. Many guesses, just for the fun of it.
Soft skills.
Management.
Soft skills.
Soft skills. Yeah. Number 1 course on this platform that we have is yoga at the workplace. Okay, number two course taken by 1 million people is stress management. Okay, so when we asked people, what do you want? They said, you know, help us deal with stress. So we put these courses. The stress management course is Sri Ravi Shankar's stress management course, 1 hour. More than 1 million people have taken it. Number 3, somebody said technology. Yeah. Number 3, emerging technologies. What technologies will change the world? Some 800,000 people have taken it. Out of the 800,000, 400,000 are police officers, Central Reserve Police Force, etc., whom we never thought should take this, right? We all thought IS officers will take it. So, reason I'm telling you this is, we are trying to give everyone what they need to do their jobs better in terms of technical skills, functional skills, and domain skills. Somebody mentioned Excel, right? A lot of people told us when we joined the civil service, no one taught us Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Now you all are hiring consultants and paying them huge amounts of money to do your charts. If you teach us, we can do it. So more than 1 million people have taken Excel, PowerPoint, and this. More than 1.3 million people have taken a course on AI. Okay? How many of you in this room have taken a course on AI? 1, 2, always at the back of the room. I love it, right? So think about this. You all are among, talented money managers and investors. Your companies are investing a lot in you. You have not taken a course on AI. Here we have a large number of Indian civil servants who are taking a course on AI. It's not mandatory because they want to do a great job in their job. Okay? India will have more people trained on AI in the civil service than any other country in the world. No country in the world has done it as fast as this. So, now, has it changed everything? To answer your question, how do you measure? Of course not. It takes, this is like moving a ship. But did anyone ever think we'd be able to train 22 million people on anything? Did anyone think that AI would be picked up by so many people? Did we ever think that so many people would learn Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Word, project management, etc.? No. So, it's a move, and that's what we're trying to do, and now it's taking up. There's a lot of momentum on it, and I hope that when you interact with civil servants, you get to see a little bit of this. So that's what we're doing. I want to say something on policy. Somebody mentioned policy, right? Somebody said policy, course on policy making or something. When I said, what is the most popular course? Somebody there at the back. So, when you talk to the senior most people, the first thing that they said is we've done many years of, writing policy. So we know that stuff cold. So we have now very good courses on public policy. But we do a very interesting thing, which is we are now doing an assessment. So I can test you on whether or not you know 20 basic things about how to write a good policy. So you can say whatever, I've been here for 30 years, but I can give you a quiz and test whether you know anything. And it's really embarrassing because most people who have been very successful don't like anyone to assess them. On what is there. So now we're doing this in a way where nobody knows your score. And when people take it, they realize, so when you first ask people, do you know how to write policy? They'll say, yes. Of course, I've been doing it for so long. Then we say, why don't you go take this quiz? See how you've done, don't tell anyone. Just, it's for you. And then immediately after that, we see a big spike in how many people are taking courses on public policy. Okay, so I think we're using lots of nudge theory to try and nudge people to do the things that make sense for them, like including on writing policy, on anything that is happening around the world, et cetera, et cetera. So sorry, very long answer to your question.
No, thank you. That's just fascinating. And some of this goes below the surface and doesn't get talked about or reported, but it is very important because, so a couple of follow-up questions on that. One is that in the last 10 years, especially after the sort of mishaps in the previous 10 years, the involvement of government in various activities has improved. For example, the infrastructure space is now almost totally dependent on the government, and there's been great success in government investments in infrastructure. But it does raise the question as to state capacity, which goes into. So where do you see progress, meaning to where you would like India to be? We've seen anecdotally some mishaps, these bridges not aligning or metro stations in the middle of nowhere and stuff. And that debate comes back as to does India have enough state capacity to make sure that the investments that we are making in infrastructure deliver the kind of returns that are required. Because this is a one-time opportunity to build out. If we don't get it right, then there'll be a long-term price to pay. So in terms of overall state capacity, from when you started to where you are now, qualitatively, where do you think we are and how much more progress do we have to make? So
let me start with just infrastructure for a second. Any any projection that you do of infrastructure will show that any national, almost 70% of the national infrastructure that we will have in 2047 at Viksit Bharat hasn't been built as yet. Okay. So we've had a huge ramp up in infrastructure, but we have a huge way to go, right? So that we can fix many things going forward, right? We are going to build a huge amount in the next 25 years, almost 70 to 80%, depending on whose numbers you take, has yet to be built, so we can build it correctly. One of the things that people ask us for a lot is, how do we teach? So now what we're going to say is, any bureaucrat, any civil servant involved in any aspect of infrastructure construction has to learn a few things. Number one, they have to learn basic project management. Okay? They have to learn how to do project management. They have to learn quality in construction. They have to learn what are the options for financing infrastructure, etc. Right? So we have laid out a series of competencies that you need to have, and how do you gain those competencies for everyone. So for example, today there are 4,000 urban local bodies in India. Okay? Even the big ones, I would argue, like Bombay, Delhi, etc., don't have as good an understanding of solid and liquid waste as they should have. But imagine what is happening at the 4,000 towns. So we need to train a very large number of people on how do you think about liquid waste, how do you think about fecal matter, how do you think about solid waste, how do you think about segregation, how do you think about recycling, right? A very, very large number. And that is state capacity building, right? So in every field, there's almost no field in which, if you look out 5 to 10 years, we can say that we have enough state capacity to do it. We have to keep building it, because the state capacity you need at $3 trillion economy is very different than what you need at 6 or what you need at 10. So we're going to have to improve. By the way, that's not just true of the public sector. It's true of the private sector. Our ability to raise money for a 6 trillion economy is very different than the ability to raise money for a 3 trillion. And where is that capacity going to come from? Right?
One area that we have not touched yet, which is of more direct impact to our group, is the state-owned enterprises and the PSUs. I was doing some analysis of the PSUs as a whole, and there's been remarkable improvement in the financial metrics, ROCs, cash flow generation, margins, all of that, barring cyclical ups and downs. Structurally, over the last 10 years, we're seeing quite a dramatic improvement. If you could touch on some of the initiatives that you've taken there, and some of them are visible to us. For example, management seem to be now a little more accountable to the board than directly to the government departments. If you could touch upon some of the things. And
sure. So who over here runs a PSU fund? Nobody. Where are all the guys who ran PSU funds? One of the best performing asset classes in the last few years, right?
Yes.
It's done fantastically. A little bit maybe overblown, but still they've done very well. So having worked with private and public sector, I'll make the following 3 observations. One is the intrinsic quality of the people and the competencies of the management in public sector enterprises is fabulous. If you take the top 20, out of the top 20 CMDs, the top 10 or 15 CMDs, if they chose to leave today, would be snapped up by any private sector company today, anywhere, right? So one, the quality of the management is very good. On average, anyone who becomes a senior leader in a PSU will have spent 30 years in that industry. So they really, really, really know the technical aspect. They don't know the management aspect as much. And a couple of things on which they're really weak, we're trying to help them. So for example, you take somebody who ran a refinery or who ran a coal mine, does a brilliant job of running it. One day he becomes director of finance and has to face a bunch of analysts, like the people here. Has no clue, because his entire communication skills has been in dealing with coal unions, right? Dealing with the coal mafia, dealing with operators of all his coal mines, and 50,000 employees. That is what the person, his communication skills or hers, are geared to that. Now you put them in front of a bunch of analysts who ask a question about, you know, when I do the triple trinomial of your ROCE versus falana dhikna, you know, you come out on the bottom quartile, can you comment on that? The guy goes, excuse me, what is this, right? Or even just basic, tell me the story of your company, right? And they have a very hard time communicating. Not because they are not outstanding people, but we haven't taught them the skills, right? So now we are running for the last year and a half, and I think you all were involved in some of them. I think you were there, right? We're taking EDs and chief financial officers of PSUs, including LIC. I think Doraiswamy was there for one of our sessions, and giving them a 2-day workshop on how you communicate. So they actually came in, we asked them to do a 5-minute spiel on their company, which you're all used to, right? And these you do 10-minute spiels. They give the spiel in front of a hardcore analyst who follows the company or follows that industry, a communication specialist, and 3 other CFOs. And we tape it. And then we make him watch it and point out all the mistakes they made. And then everyone who was watching it points out everything they can do to do better. And then they go back and have to do it again. Then they have to do it again. And then we keep training them over the year on how to do this. And so hopefully, that's one skill that they will get better at. Like that, we're trying to figure out what are the 5 or 6 things that they are not good at that they should do. For example, we ran a workshop on value creation. What is value creation? You know, how do you think about ROC? How do you think about shareholders? How are they thinking about value creation? And helping them think about what they should do in light of that. So our idea on helping them do this is first give them a lot of freedom. Don't interfere on micro decisions and macro decisions. Get the best CMDs that you can possibly get, and train them and train them and train them on the things that they are not good at. They are not good at communications. They don't think enough about shareholder value creation. They do a lot more today than they did before, but we want them to do even more. And they don't think as much about, they don't, on the natural course of their careers, don't meet a lot of people outside the PSU world and the ministry. You know, anybody at any other company will be meeting lots and lots of people around. So we're trying to give them training and exposure to others so that they become well-rounded people. So things like that is what we're trying to do to help improve the PSUs. I'm very confident. Listen, if you think about the power sector, NTPC and others in the power sector are as good as anybody else, right? They compete with the private sector and they're really good, etc. And I think in many other fields, the quality of the PSUs is getting better and better and better.
One last question from me before I go to the audience. Maybe slightly out of our domain, but is very important to all of us. One area where all of us in the markets have been somewhat disappointed is that the PSU disinvestment agenda or divestment privatization agenda seems to have slowed down in the last 4 or 5 years. Part of it one can understand because I think the government has made it fairly clear that they wanted to improve the performance of the PSUs before they took them to the market in the hope that you would get better valuation. But we are now at that point where further improvements in productivity, in standards are becoming incrementally smaller. Valuations are very attractive in many cases. And we are in that part of the fiscal cycle where it would certainly help to start an aggressive privatization mode. So I know that's not exactly your domain, and I'm putting you on the spot, but would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
I'll give you my thoughts, and these are, the official government view on privatization is something finance minister can talk about, right? Because that's a policy.
Absolutely.
Many things go into a policy, right? As owners of shares, at one level, the only thing a share owner cares about is what's the value of the share and will it go up? And if you privatize, I get lots of investment bankers make lots of money, and there's more float in the market for those, right? So there's a very particular view by which you view privatization. Privatization has many other policy implications that, everything comes together to do it. For example, there are certain areas in which the government has suddenly felt that, not suddenly, felt for a long time, that strategically we need a player in this business because that gives us control. And now, especially after the breakdown of global value chains and others, there are many areas in which we feel that we should have something. So I'll give you a very classic example. Many years ago in pharma, the Indian government actually started pharma companies, IDPL I think it was called, right? The entire Hyderabad pharma group of companies all came out of that company, right? That company is now shut down. And they used to make penicillin, right? And we don't make penicillin anymore. All the penicillin is in China. And for a long time, it didn't matter because we could get it for very little. And so the fact that the company was shut down didn't matter. But today, it is of strategic importance that India have penicillin. Imagine a war in which you don't have penicillin and the only place you can get it from is China. Strategically, it doesn't make any sense, right? And so now you'd start saying, gee, maybe I should have a PSU that does this, right? So there are many such strategic issues that go into the collection of how much should we do. That's one. The second thing, of course, is, PSUs were viewed as, divestment was viewed as a way to get cash for the fiscal deficit. Right now, tax revenues are so buoyant, and the dividends from PSUs are pretty good, and smaller privatizations, just sell another 10%, incremental privatization can give you a lot. So there isn't that burning need, right? Many policy changes occur when an incident occurs or there is a burning need for it, right? So when that happens, the government will make a decision, but it isn't just based on the need for money. It is based on many other things. I think you have to ask FM what her view is on this.
No, that's fascinating. That's a very interesting response. We'll now open it up to questions. I see Andre's hand up, so please, we'll start there.
Hello. Adil, first of all, great stuff that you and your team are doing. I'm really happy to hear that these initiatives are being done, so more power to you. Great stuff. I had two questions. One is that, have you been taking any training programs to improve the risk-taking of public sector employees? So far they have been rewarded for not taking risks, to cover their ass, etc., etc. Is there a training for them to actually take risks the way you would take them in the private sector? That's my first question. And the second question is in terms of corruption in the infrastructure space, right? We see it as citizens every day. The same road gets relayed several times, a road which is supposed to last for 10 years. You see the same thing happening. And we know that if the cost that needs to go into a road is 100, what actually goes in is about 70 and the other 30 gets siphoned off, if not more, right? So if you were to correct that, now there are two problems here. There is the politician involved and there's a bureaucrat involved, right? Let's keep the politicians out at the moment because we're talking about the bureaucrats. You either need integrity or you need courage, right? There could be either one of these two ingredients for you to actually tackle this endemic corruption in the infrastructure space. So is there anything being done to tackle that? So these are my two questions.
So let me start with the first question. I think your issue on risk is a very good one. So I'll start out by saying that, when we were first appointed to the commission, it was during COVID. So we couldn't meet. So we spent the first 3 months and we talked to 100 HR executives and leaders of large organizations around the world on what should we be doing to improve competencies and capacity of the state. So 50% of them said, unless you change everything, you can't change anything, right? So if you train someone on something, but you haven't changed how they're compensated, how they were hired, how they are transferred, how they're promoted, then it won't mean anything. So basically, you're going to fail. The other 50% said, if you try to change everything, you won't be able to change anything. So you're going to fail. So 100% of the people told us how we could fail, right? But nobody could tell us how to succeed. So when we talked to the PM and we laid out what we were trying to do, the PM said, we've tried to do, this is a huge country, 22 million people. You can't change everything. It's too much for us. Take one thing and make a little bit of a difference. If you make a little bit of a difference, it'll allow you to do more and more and more. And ultimately, you can wind up tackling everything from promotions to transfers, etc. But if you try to do it all together, it won't work. So what we did in the first 4 years is we focused very much on understanding what you need to succeed, what competencies you need, and how can we help you do that, and get you that training and test whether you have it, right? That's it. We are not linking it to anything else. So on the risk-taking, what we have done so far is, we have said, we have a series of courses on how do you think about risk, so that you can think about what to do on risk. And we have a series of courses on how do you think about risk when you're trying to get something done. So for example, the most successful schemes of the government are those where there was a very clear direction. It went from the top and it was done in a mission mode with a very clear target that was monitored every day, right? So Jandan accounts, monitored from the top, we got 300 million. Toilets, 100 million were built, monitored from the top. PM Awas Yojana, housing, huge numbers were done, etc., etc. Gas cylinders, LED lamps, etc. So, and now Har Ghar Jal Jal, right? So, when you're doing major things that are important for the government, how do you factor in risk? Is something that we try to teach people. So, in where the outcome is very clear, it's very clear, right? I'm trying to build 100 million toilets, and I'm doing 300 million. Then actually those schemes are run well, and we take the risks and we say, listen, I have to get to 100 million. I have to take the risk. I don't, that's it. Nobody's asking me about anything else. I just have to deliver 100, right? So there we teach people, not teach, there's a lot of case studies about what it took and what kind of risks people take. But how do you train somebody to say, I will take this risk in a policy decision, right? And that's a little more complicated, that we're trying to get people to understand what they're trying to do. So the moment somebody says, my job is to improve the health of 1.4 billion people, they take a lot more risks than when they think that their job is to introduce new rules. So if we can change people's mindsets on that, we will get there, right? Have we got there? No, right? But this is the direction that we're trying to go in. So that was your first question. The second question was, had to do with corruption. And I don't want to say much about corruption because it's a very complicated topic. The only thing I will say is on, there are many modes of doing this. I'll tell you my history, my personal history. This has nothing to do with the government. A few years ago, I decided that I should explore the impact of corruption on the growth rate of a country. Nothing to do with morals and morally is it right or wrong, just how does it affect the growth rate of a country. And I said, I'm not smart enough to figure this out. So I will only talk to Nobel Prize winners who have done economic research and ask them this question. So the first Nobel Prize winner I met after we finished a bottle and a half of scotch, and he was now in a mood to be open and honest, I said, what is the effect of corruption on the growth rate of a country? And he said, it depends, right? So I said, wonderful. What does it depend on? So he says, are you looking at illegal corruption and legal corruption, or are you only looking at one of those? So I said, you tell me what I should look at. So he said, as an economist, there is there's an optimal use of resources, right? Anything that moves from the optimal use of resources is a corruption, whether you do it legally or illegally. So if I'm the pharma industry in the US and I spend $1 billion a year in getting Congress to pass legislation that says you cannot negotiate the price of the drug, as a result of which the drug prices in the US are 10 to 50 times that of India. Is that corruption or not corruption? That was his question. So I said, listen, you're the Nobel Prize winner. I'm asking you this question. Don't tell me what it is, right? So anyway, so I got this, right? I said, I understand what you're saying. So I said, next Nobel Prize winner that I met a couple of months later, after a bottle of scotch, I asked him the same question. And he said, it depends. And I said, I'm used to this now, so tell me what it depends on. So he said, it depends on how do you judge the benefits of a correct decision versus a wrong decision with no corruption or the right decision with some corruption. How do you do that trade-off? So he said, you know, and I'll give one example is in India, one of the parties that were the least personally corrupt in the 80s and 70s was the Communist Party of India. If you met the heads of the Communist Party of India, they hardly had 2 shirts and 2 pants, right? But they made horrible decisions. And that affected the growth rate of the country a lot. So the second guy said, how do you judge the effect of corruption? If there is 1% corruption and it leads to the right decision, how do you think about that versus no corruption and a horrible decision? I said, okay, I got it. So I said, I think I need to speak to some more, Nobel Prize winners. So I won't go through all 10, okay? I'll only stop at the third one. So third guy, a couple of months later, I met, and he said, it depends. I said, of course I know this depends, but on what? He said, whether it's centralized corruption or decentralized corruption. A lot of studies have been done on road construction projects in Indonesia, where there was centralized corruption and decentralized corruption. And where there was centralized corruption, the road came in closer to the optimal cost and in the optimal time compared to decentralized corruption. Okay? So it's the same level of corruption. One is centralized, one is decentralized, makes the world of difference. So I said, listen, this is getting very complicated. So anyway, I went and talked to 10 different Nobel Prize winners. And the only thing I can say at the end of that is that the thought that getting rid of corruption is the answer to all our problems on anything is just flat out wrong. It depends on many, many factors, including all of this, right? I'll stop at the fourth one. Sorry, I have to tell you the fourth one. The fourth one was very interesting. He said, if you look at the countries that grew the fastest, during their fastest period of growth, whether it was China, Japan after in the 60s and 70s when it was growing like crazy, America in the 1800s or whatever, the level of corruption actually was pretty strong at that time. Okay? Yet they grew very fast. But when a country's GDP per capita goes above a certain amount, then the public and the citizen expect that corruption to go down. So, you know, the reason I'm saying this is a very complicated question. What you're saying is there's a lot of corruption in infrastructure contracts. Some affects it a lot, some doesn't affect it that much, is all I can say. Sorry for the long answer, but it's a very fascinating topic.
Thank you. Fascinating. And as someone who grew up in 1980s Calcutta, that Communist Party example hit home. Any other questions from the floor?
I think everyone's saying, man, I want to have lunch. You know, I'll get a long answer, forget it. Let's go.
Sir,
Go for it, Amit.
Amit from MK Global. MK Global. So my question is, since we are talking capacity building, and you guys have been doing some great work on the government side of it. So when we think of judiciary, they are, strained on capacity. Are they exploring anything in your direction?
So the first question on the UPSC exam has to do with the Constitution of India. Constitution of India, the judiciary is a law unto itself. It does not report to the central government or state government or anything else. And since we as a commission was set up by Honorable Prime Minister, we just stayed completely away from the judiciary. The only time we can do anything in the judiciary in terms of capacity building is if the Chief Justice says, I want to do something in the system and please help us, right? Do it. So we are not doing that and we can't force ourselves, right? But what is happening is very interesting, which is LMS system, the learning management system that we've built, which is a digital system, has a lot of courses, and anyone who's a government employee, whether in judiciary or not, can take courses. So we are seeing a lot of people who work in the judiciary take a lot of these courses, but we have not systematically made an effort to upgrade the judiciary, and we have enough on our plate, and you sort of get into these constitutional boundaries, so we didn't want to deal with it. Just being honest.
Thank you. We will call time on this, and this was a fascinating session, and we learned so much of it goes below the radar.
So, I had black hair and lots more hair before I started this job.